This video is sponsored by Card Kingdom. You can visit their store by using my referral link in the description below. Hi everyone, I'm Neat Sahone, and today is Wednesday, and that means it's time for another MTG Top 10, the series where I rank cards based on their historical performance at Magic's highest level of competition. Today, we're going to take a look at tutors that can search for any card. In Magic, a tutor is a card that allows you to search your library for something and put it on top of your library, into your hand, or on the battlefield. We call it a tutor because the first card with this effect was called Demonic Tutor, which appeared in Alpha, and many more have been printed in the years since, including many more that have tutor in the name. I have actually looked at tutors more broadly in the past, but I thought it would be interesting to do a list that zooms in a bit on the most powerful type of tutor effect, the ability to search up any card, not just a card of a specific type or color or something like that. This type of tutor almost exclusively appears in black, with other colors usually only possessing the ability to tutor up some color-appropriate card types. To be eligible for this list, a card had to be able to search your library for a card without any restrictions and put it into your hand, on the battlefield, or on top of your library. There were 48 cards that met that requirement, and in this video we'll take a look at the 10 that have left the biggest impact on competitive Magic. Before we get started, here's a quick reminder on how I rank cards in these videos. A first tier top 8 is worth 2 points, this includes events like Pro Tours, and a second tier top 8 is worth 1 point, this includes events like Regional Championships. Alright, let's take a look at the top 10 tutors that can search for any card. At number 10, it is Imperial Seal. For 1 black mana, this sorcery lets you search up any card and put it on top of your library, and you lose 2 life. Putting a card on top of your library is not nearly as good as putting a card directly into your hand. Not only do you not get immediate access to the card you want, but this type of tutor is actually card disadvantage. You use up a card and you don't get one back. Tutors that put a card directly into your hand have you break even on cards. This kind of tutor doesn't. That said, it does only cost a single mana and grabs any card in your deck, so the disadvantage can be worth it, especially if your deck has several different things it needs to tutor up. Imperial Seal was originally printed in Portal 3 Kingdoms, and this meant for a long time it wasn't legal in Magic tournaments. This was a special set that was released primarily for Asian markets, and it was a simplified version of Magic. However, starting in 2005, cards from Portal sets became legal in Legacy and Vintage, although Imperial Seal was quickly banned in Legacy and restricted in Vintage, so Vintage is actually the only format where it's ever been capable of gaining points. It's often used in combo decks in that format to help make them more consistent. Having additional copies of your Oath of Druids or Storm cards is pretty great. It's likely to keep gaining points in Vintage in the future. At number 9, it is the Cruelty of Gixx, the newest card to make the list. This 5-mana saga comes with read ahead, which means, unlike most sagas, you can choose to start on any of its chapters. The Cruelty's Chapter 1 lets you force your opponent to discard a creature or planeswalker. Chapter 2 is the effect that gets it on this list because it allows you to search up any card and put it into your hand, and you lose 3 life. Chapter 3 lets you reanimate a creature. If you have the time to take advantage of all 3 of these chapters, you end up with a 3-for-1 here, which is really impressive. So far, all of its points have come in standard control decks that use it as a way to simultaneously disrupt the opponent, tutor up a key spell, sometimes just another copy of Cruelty, and then reanimate a win condition. It's in a good spot to keep gaining points in standard, and it has a very long time before it ever rotates. That said, it doesn't have a great shot at seeing long-term play in other formats. While the value it generates is awesome, the fact it costs 5 makes it too expensive for most other formats. At number 8, it is Masterminds Acquisition. This 4-mana sorcery gives you 2 options. You can tutor up any card from your deck, or you can grab any card out of your sideboard. That does make it even more flexible than any other tutor on this list, as the others aren't capable of grabbing something out of the sideboard too. It's gained all of its points in Pioneer Lotus Field decks, where it can be used to help search up the deck's eponymous land, as well as various ways to untap the field to generate insane amounts of mana. Additionally, the deck can grab most of its win conditions out of its sideboard, which is pretty nice. It isn't very good to draw something like Zakama until you can actually cast it, and Masterminds Acquisition makes sure that won't happen. Lotus Field decks are still a force in Pioneer, so you can expect Acquisition to keep gaining points. At number 7, it is Wishclaw Talisman. This 2-mana artifact enters the battlefield with 3 wish counters, and you can pay 1 generic mana and tap it and remove a wish counter to search your library for a card and put it into your hand. The downside is your opponent gains control of it after you do this. If all 3 wish counters get used, you do come out ahead because your opponent tutors 1 card and you grab 2, Of course, in many of the decks that use it, the whole plan is to win the game before your opponent ever gets a chance to use the talisman themselves. This is usually accomplished by paying 1 mana to grab the combo piece that wins you the game. The talisman has enjoyed multi-format success, with Legacy the spot where it's been the most successful. There, it's often used in Storm decks. It's going to keep gaining points in multiple formats, and it has a very good shot at continuing to move up this list in the future. At number 6, it is Gamble, the only non-black card to make this list. This red take on a tutor searches your library for any card for only 1 mana, but true to its name, it is a bit of a gamble, because after you search that card up, you have to discard a card at random, and there is every chance you end up discarding the card you grabbed. That's certainly an interesting way to balance a tutor effect, and I think it's actually quite effective. It means you need to maximize the number of cards in your hand when you use this, so that the card you tutor is less likely to go away. Alternatively, you could just tutor up a card you're fine with putting into your graveyard. Almost all of Gamble's points so far have come in Legacy Lands decks, which are a perfect fit for Gamble. Lands decks, as you can probably guess, are loaded up with a bunch of lands and various ways to tutor them. Some of these are toolbox lands you only run a single copy of, but are particularly good depending on the board state. The deck also runs various land-based combos, which generally involve combining Dark Depths with Thespian Stage. One of the key cards in the deck is Life from the Loam, which can let you get back any of the lands you tutor up, and if you discard Life from the Loam itself, well, you can just get it back with Dredge. Gamble is going to keep gaining points in Legacy in the future. At number 5, it is Liliana Vest. This is the original Liliana, and one of the original 5 Planeswalkers that made their debut in Lorwyn. She's a 5 mana, 5 loyalty Planeswalker. Her +1 makes your opponent discard a card, her -2 lets you tutor a card to the top of your library, and her ultimate lets you reanimate all creatures from all graveyards. Like a lot of early Planeswalkers, Liliana Vest was actually reprinted a bunch, including in Magic 2010, Magic 2011, and Magic 2015. This gave her legality in Standard for a pretty large span of time, and that's part of what allows her to have 44 points. Her first time through Standard, she was played in Elf and Fairy tribal decks. Later, she was featured in Abzan, Sultai, and Blue-Black Control. She's also gained a couple of points in extended Deathcloud decks, which took advantage of the fact that Deathcloud didn't make you lose your Planeswalkers, so you could basically nuke the whole board and hold on to your walkers, like Liliana, who could eventually just reanimate everything you killed. She could also, of course, tutor up Deathcloud in the first place. She hasn't gained any points anywhere since 2015, and cards like Gamble and Wishclaw Talisman are pretty likely to pass her in the future. At number 4, it is Infernal Tutor. This 2-mana tutor starts with a massive restriction. It can only grab a card from your deck if you have a copy of that card in your hand and you reveal it. However, if you're Hellbent, which means you have no cards in your hand, it just straight up turns into Demonic Tutor, since it can grab any card for only 2 mana. Obviously, getting to Hellbent isn't something all decks can easily do, and this is a terrible card when you can't set it up. But if you can, this is an amazing tutor. It's gained almost all of its points in Legacy Storm decks that use Lion's Eye Diamond. The Diamond has you discard your hand to generate mana, and then the deck plans on casting a bunch of stuff from the graveyard using things like Past in Flames to generate a huge storm count before winning the game with Tendrils of Agony. This deck can very easily cast a tutor from the graveyard after they discard it, and this is often enough to allow you to go off. It's going to keep gaining points in Legacy going forward. At number 3, it is Dark Petition. This 5-mana sorcery tutors up any card and puts it in your hand, and then, if you have 2 or more instants or sorceries in your graveyard, it gives you back 3 black mana. This kind of makes it a roundabout version of Demonic Tutor, because in the end, you end up paying only 2 mana to search up anything. It also makes it easier for you to tutor up and immediately play the card you grabbed. It saw some play in standard Delirium control decks, which could very easily make sure to get the mana back for the Petition, since they were already interested in loading the graveyard. Like some other tutors on the list, it's also been used in Pioneer Lotus Field combo decks and Legacy and Vintage Storm decks. It has quickly asserted itself as one of the best tutors out there, even in the Eternal formats, and it even has some chance to catch the number 2 card on the list someday. Right now, though, that card is Vampiric Tutor. This is an instant speed version of our number 10 card, Imperial Seal. Both cost 1 black mana, search up any card and put it on top of your library, and you lose 2 life. In fact, the Seal was basically a port of Vampiric Tutor into the standalone Portal 3 Kingdoms set, because that simplified set didn't have any instants. That said, the massive gap between the 2 cards shows you just how much better it is to have this effect at instant speed. You can use it at the end of your opponent's turn so that you can get your card much more quickly, and you can also have the flexibility of leaving your mana up in general. While we saw that Imperial Seal has seen sporadic play over the years, Vampiric Tutor has seen a ton of play ever since being printed. It started by enabling Magic's very first true combo deck, Frostbloom and Mirage Block Constructed. The deck made a bunch of mana and drew a bunch of cards before winning with a lethal drain life. By the way, if you want to know more about that deck, I went super deep on it in a deck history video. But yeah, pretty much since day one, it has helped combo decks in multiple formats, including Extended Goblin Charbelcher and Vintage Doomsday. It's banned in Legacy and restricted in Vintage, but it's going to keep gaining points going forward. And at number 1, probably not surprising anyone, it's the original Tutor, Demonic Tutor. We have multiple cards on this list that are considered really good, that make you jump through hoops just to get the same effect that this always has, paying 2 and searching up any card from your deck and putting it into your hand. It was quickly very clear that Demonic Tutor was busted, so when they began banning and restricting cards in 1994, it found itself on the restricted list by the second announcement, though honestly the fact that they didn't get it with the first announcement is a little surprising. It makes your deck way too consistent and can allow you to set up absurd combos quite easily. It's been restricted or banned in every format since then, and these days, it's only legal as a one-of in Vintage. It still manages to have a massive score since it's been a staple in the format for so very long, and virtually any black deck in the format still runs the one Demonic Tutor they're allowed. Most events have multiple decks in the top 8 that run that singleton tutor, and that's not going to change, probably ever, so it's hard to imagine it ever finds itself overtaken on this list. So those are the top 10 cards that can tutor up any card in your deck. If you're interested in having access to this powerful effect, check out the description where you can find a direct Card Kingdom link for each card that appeared in the video. If you want to make sure you catch future videos, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. If you want to catch up on past videos, including one that looks at tutors more broadly, you should see some playlists on your screen shortly. And if you want to go the extra mile in supporting me and the channel, you can do that by becoming a patron or a channel member. You can find ways to do those things in the description. Thanks for watching.